think you'll agree that plums are already delicious as a standalone fruit. But I have a secret. Plums are even better when you turn them into an Asian plum sauce. Once you experience the savory goodness that comes with simmering plums with spices like allspice, ginger, and cloves in vinegar, the well-rounded flavor with a mildly tangy finish will create a slippery slope because you'll want to slather, rub, bake, and drizzle this on everything. So before we get to this incredibly easy recipe, where I'll also show you how to can it without any special equipment, let me show you a few ways to make this easy make-at-home Asian plum sauce recipe at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Let's start with breakfast.
Take all the flavors you love in a well-made stir fry and bring them to breakfast. Start by chopping a mix of peppers and green onion. I went out back to harvest some for my green stalk vertical garden. Add shredded carrots or whatever other veggies you have on hand. Now, if you already have leftover cooked rice or noodles, this will be one of the easiest and healthiest breakfasts you'll ever make. Saute your mixed veggies for a few minutes until things are soft and fragrant. Then crack several eggs and stir until combined. Now, this morning I added some canned ham that I had to the mix, but feel free to add sausage or bacon or even chicken and beef if you're serving this for brunch. Top your rice with the veggie mix, being sure to spread things out. Next, pour your whisked eggs on top and place your pan in a preheated oven and bake until the eggs are fully cooked. Your family is going to love this savory pie where the simple plum sauce shines when it's poured on top. You'll love this recipe because it's quick, full of veggies, a serving of fruit, and extremely satisfying. By the way, this recipe easily converts to a mega-head grab-and-go breakfast by spooning the mixture into a muffin pan to bake. You might like this option if you want the egg to completely saturate the bottom of the rice. It's your choice.
Side note, this recipe is just as delicious if you want to use leftover noodles instead of rice. Now let's head over to lunch. Let's talk about when you need to put something on the table quick, fast, and in a hurry.
Anything, yes, I mean anything fried or crispy baked will be a perfect partner with this savory Asian plum sauce. Deep fried dishes like spring rolls, egg rolls, wontons, dumplings, or as a glaze on meats like roasted duck, fried chicken, or pork. It's so worth it to make and can this recipe because most grocery stores rarely stock plum sauce, and when you find it, it's incredibly expensive for the size you get.
I know, it's so disappointing.
So whether it's game day or you're short on time, let this dipping sauce come to the rescue when you've got a hungry crowd or, in my case, hungry parents.
Here are some dinner ideas you've got to try.
This dinner idea may be your favorite way to use this sauce. Why? Because it's just 2 pots and 3 ingredients. This sauce, egg noodles, and chicken thighs.
If you're feeling fancy, sprinkle on some sesame seeds or green onion.
All you'll do is baste your savory Asian plum sauce on your meat and bake until it's deeply bronzed and well done. You know, I love canning because it gives me convenience and quality. Coming home from work and being able to grab a jar of something that's homemade to make easy meals in minutes is the best kept meal prep secret. Most sauce packets are high in something and never give you enough. That problem is solved when you make the sauce yourself. Later in the video, I'll share sugar substitutes for this low sugar recipe so that you get exactly what you want and everything you don't.
Now these are just a few ideas. For more recipe information, check out my blog because you've got to try the breakfast bagel bake with Asian plum sauce. So good. And the sticky chicken drumsticks. And don't forget the plum sauce salmon. You'll also enjoy this stirred into soups and casseroles and dressings for Asian coleslaw, dips that need a bit of a pick-me-up, and as the perfect holiday or hostess gift. If this is our first time meeting, hi, I'm Cassandra from the blog becomingafarmgirl.com, where I share candy recipes for modern meals and ways to live a farm-fresh life without land or livestock. Now it's time to dive into the recipe, but don't worry about writing anything down. The link to the printable recipe is below. If you're a returning friend that enjoys my canning recipes, use the link below to automatically receive all of my recipes straight to your inbox each time I post a video. FYI, it's strictly the recipe post where I go a bit into depth about things. It's not a newsletter. And if you're already signed up, the recipe, video, pictures, and full blog post is already in your inbox. Now, I will meet you back here in a couple of minutes so we can talk about canning safety, recipe tips, and some of my recommendations. Now let's get started.
After thoroughly cleaning your plums with a produce-safe washing solution, cut your plums in half to remove the pits. You can add the pits to your compost, make stone pit vinegar, or simple syrup. Then, finely chop the plums by hand or use a food processor. This step will reduce the simmering time later on. Then combine plums, sugar, vinegar, and salt in a large non-reactive stainless steel or enamel saucepan. Bring ingredients to an uncovered boil using high heat for 3 to 5 minutes, stirring intermittently. Next, stir in garlic, onion, and your raisins, which add sweetness and body, and give things a good stir. Add soy sauce and your warming spices, cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, chili powder, allspice, and ginger. Bring the ingredients back to a full boil, then reduce the heat to a gentle simmer.
While our sauce is simmering on the stove, I wanted to jump back in and share some of my recipe tips and recommendations. Because while we want this recipe to be delicious, and it will be, it also needs to be safe. And that's why all the recipes that I share are sourced from approved canning authorities like the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the National Center for Home Food Preservation, and companies like Ball and Bernardin. The recipe that I'm sharing with you today comes from one of my absolute favorite canning recipe books that I've shared many times here on the channel. The Complete Book of Small Batch Preserving Over 300 Delicious Recipes to Use Year-Round by Ellie Topp and Margaret Howard. This book has been a bestseller in food preservation for decades and is a canning classic. If you're looking to start off by canning small batches of between 6 to 10 jars, this is your go-to book. And if you're looking to can beyond the basics of single ingredient items like just a particular vegetable, but you want to move into savory spreads and sauces and jams and jellies, this book is it. Now, it doesn't have pictures, but each recipe has a detailed description that will make your mouth water. I've included the link to where you can find this book on Amazon along with its raving reviews in the description box below. All right, friends, so now we're gonna move into my recipe tips, which I think will be more than helpful for when you go to make this recipe. All right, so I'm calling my first tip, no plums, no problem. Yeah, it's true, because you can substitute the plums in this recipe with a number of other fruits, like peaches, prunes, cherries, apricots, papayas, or apples for a tasty twist. All right, and my second tip is to leave your plum skins on. This is because plum skins are generally sweet and are also high in vitamin K, A, and fiber. Now, the skins will disintegrate as the sauce simmers, and the skins will also contribute to the texture and taste of your sauce. All right, so I've noted here in tip 3 that plums aren't picky. That's right, you can totally use fresh, frozen, or dried plums or prunes for this recipe. You just want to make sure that you completely remove those pits. Tip 4 is a reminder to stay in season. And I wanted to note here, if you want the best taste and the cheapest price, stick with in-season plums. So plum season is generally May through October, depending on the variety and your location. So what I do is preserve as much as I can fresh, and then I just put the rest away in the freezer to use later on. And according to the Oregon State Extension Office, plums can be frozen in a sugar pack using 5 parts fruit with 1 part sugar, or a syrup pack using a 50% syrup, or frozen whole with no added sugar or syrup. Plums and prunes can also be cooked in a sugar syrup before freezing to make into a sauce. Now, I've actually tried all of these methods just depending on how much time I have, and all of them have turned out great. Tip 5 is called mix it up. So if you're short on plums, you can use a combination of plums and apricots, which will yield a very similar ending result. But of course, you don't want to use any plums or fruit that are badly blemished or starting to mold. So another tip that you want to consider is the vinegar that you're going to use. So in this recipe, I am personally opting to use apple cider vinegar because it's smoother and it has less of that kind of punchy tang or like tartness that white distilled vinegar has. But those are just my taste buds for this particular recipe. Now, if you want something sweet and a bit more crisp, you definitely got to try rice wine vinegar. So regardless of whatever variety of vinegar you use, as long as your vinegar strength is 5%, meaning don't use your homemade stuff, your recipe will be safe and ready to can. Now, I do a lot of canning for my parents and they prefer low sugar recipes, and you can totally replace the sugar in this recipe recipe with non-heat sensitive artificial sweeteners such as Splenda. Mild flavor honey may also be used to replace up to half of the white sugar that this recipe uses. You'll notice that I actually used brown sugar in this recipe, which is also a perfectly safe substitute to use. You do not want to use aspartame because it will lose its sweetness during the processing time. All right, last tip. Lick the spoon, or at least take a taste test before you jar it up. Why? Because it's your plum sauce recipe. I'm just here to convince you to stop buying the store stuff and to show you that you can safely can your own condiments right at home. If the spirit moves you, add a splash of sriracha or chipotle seasoning or any other spices. Tweaking a canning recipe until you think it's right is what canning is all about. But with that being said, do not can this recipe in anything larger than a pint-sized jar, and do not add meat, dairy, or nuts to this recipe. Whew. Those are all my tips. Visit the blog for more details. Now let's head back to the stove.
About 50 minutes later, your mixture will thicken to this gorgeous deep purple sauce. Cut the heat and allow ingredients to cool enough for you to puree your mixture into a smooth, spreadable consistency. Now it's time to can our sauce. Using sterilized jars, ladle the plum sauce into jars, stopping to leave a ½ inch of headspace. You'll also want to remove any air bubbles by running a long plastic or wooden skewer between the jar and the sauce, as well as wipe the rims of the jars with vinegar to remove any spillage, which can prevent your jars from creating a seal. After this, you'll place new lids on top of each jar and secure the lid with a ring until it's fingertip tight, secured but air can still pass through. Using a tall, heavy-bottomed stock pot, line your pot with a jar rack or tray, then lower the jars onto the tray and into your water bath pot. Pour in enough water to ensure that water covers at least an inch above your jars. Place a lid on your pot and bring water to a full boil for 15 minutes. Use a jar lifter to remove the jars out of the water and let them cool on a towel undisturbed for a minimum of 8 hours. After 8 hours, you can confirm that the jars have sealed by removing the rings. A sealed jar lid will remain secured to the jar without the rim and be slightly indented in the center. Use your index finger to moderately tap on the jar in a few places. It should not pop back up when pressed. Now, the majority of your jars will seal within a couple of hours of cooling down. But if you have any jars that didn't seal properly, just store them in the fridge and use them within the month. To get more candy recipes, join me here weekly or over on the blog. I'll see you in my kitchen or garden soon.